Doesn't. Mine's on.
Yours is on?
Yours
Mine is on
okay,
too.
there we go.
Okay, great. We're ready to go. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mohammed Libyan. I'm the program manager for Startup Acceleration at Qatar Science and Technology Park. Welcome to Qatar Foundation Education City Speaker Series. For those of you who haven't come to these series before, I think this is a great opportunity for all of us to engage with thought leaders about topics that are important to us today and in the near future. And today we have an honored guest. For logistics about today, we'll speak for half an hour back and forth, and then we'll open the floor up for an opportunity to anyone to ask any questions. So half an hour roughly, and then half an hour of Q&A. I hope everyone has their questions ready. Technology, I'm in technology and innovation. We all know, we all experience it, that technology is changing every day in certain areas at a very rapid pace. In fitness and in health and personalized medicine, we're seeing a lot of changes, with Qatar Foundation launching a new personalized medicine institute. So that's a priority. And with that in mind, we're honored to have a guru in fitness and in tech, Mr. Will Ahmed, who is the founder. Yes, wow.
Thank you.
I'm sure you already know, Will is the founder and CEO of Whoop. And Will, very honored to have you here today. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome. We have a lot to talk about, but can we start from the very beginning? Perhaps just before or at the time you were thinking about Whoop. So you were an athlete, you were studying at Harvard, you were on the squash team at Harvard. What compelled you with all, at that time in your life, I assume you had a lot of different options in which direction you want to take your life. What compelled you to follow the track of an entrepreneur?
I think in a lot of ways I became an entrepreneur before I knew what an entrepreneur was. I grew up always into sports and exercise, and that was just a passion of mine. And I played squash at Harvard, so I kind of saw what it was like to train as a competitive athlete. And the experience as training as an athlete made me feel like there wasn't a lot of information on what I was doing to my body. So I was someone who used to overtrain, but I think, there were other athletes who would undertrain or misinterpret fitness peaks or not necessarily understand the importance of sleep or recovery. And so I just found myself getting very interested in what could you measure about the human body. Now, this is 15 years ago now, so quite a long time ago. And as I was doing more and more research, I became interested in a few different types of technology that existed, but I thought were obtrusive or uncomfortable to use. And those three technologies included the electrocardiogram, which some people might be familiar with from a hospital setting, where you kind of put all these nodes, on your body, and it measures heart rate, and in particular heart rate variability, very accurately. The PSG machine, which was really like the gold standard for measuring sleep. So if anyone's done a sleep apnea test, maybe you've gone and gotten hooked up to a PSG machine. And the chest strap, which was a heart rate monitor, which people would wear around their chest, and was really good at measuring heart rate during all different forms of activity. But again, pretty uncomfortable. So I looked at these technologies, and I looked at a lot of the medical research around things like heart rate variability and sleep and heart rate and movement during exercise. And I thought, wow, this is a very interesting compilation of data. But the problem is that no one really has access to this data. It's not easy to use this technology, either because it's expensive or it's cumbersome or it's uncomfortable. And so that began another question for me, which was, well, is it possible to build technology to replace these pieces of medical technology? Is it possible to replace them? And if you could replace them, is there a business opportunity in that? And so one benefit of being a student is that you can spend time exploring questions. And so that's really what I ended up doing over the course of 4 years at Harvard. So really from the ages of like 18 to 22. And I think along the way, I found myself trying to build the confidence really to start a company. I didn't know what starting a company was. Again, I didn't really know what it meant to be an entrepreneur. And so if you're nervous, be prepared. Like, I found myself doing a lot of work to overcome maybe my shortcomings, so to speak, of being a business person or of being an entrepreneur.
Wonderful. So you were quite sincere, I guess, with yourself, that you understood what your shortcomings were and what was necessary to succeed. You were willing to try it out. Can we talk a little bit about the challenges? I know from our experience, my experience with startups in the US and Canada, we know that between 80 to 90% of startups, they fail. And they usually fail within the first 2 years, 1 or 2 years, most of them disappear. You are one of the few that have succeeded and gone beyond the unicorn stage. Can we talk a little bit share with us a little bit about what were some of the challenges in the early years of founding Whoop, and how did you overcome those?
Yeah, I think there's sort of two broad challenges. One was the challenge of building the company. The other was the challenge of becoming a CEO or becoming someone who could lead a company. And I cite both of those because, if you don't build a great business, that's going to get you in trouble. But if you don't actually grow yourself in the process, that's also going to get you in a lot of trouble, and probably beyond business in your own life. And so I was dealing with both of those things. On the business side, the biggest challenge that we faced in the first few years of building Whoop was this question of, can we actually build this technology? And that was a pretty existential question. Like, the technology that we were trying to build had never existed before. And there's something really exciting and exhilarating about building something that's never existed before, but it's also daunting in the sense that you don't truly know whether you're going to be able to do it. And so that required a lot of persistence and data collection and recruiting of really brilliant mathematicians and data scientists, working with very top professors and researchers. And over the course of the first, I would say, 2 years of the company, we were able to develop prototypes, albeit very ugly prototypes, but we were able to develop prototypes that could measure data non-invasively. It might have been a big box with a long wire and then a small wristband that comes off the wire, and you had to plug the box into a wall. But anyway, like, the wristband itself and the readings that it was able to take proved that, okay, you could take this end-to-end system and you could put it into a much smaller form factor. One thing to think about as you're building a business is, well, what do I need to de-risk at what stage? And so you asked about the first 2 years of the company. In the first 2 years of the company, we really had to de-risk this idea of, can you even build the technology? At later stages from there, it became questions of, well, can you get professional athletes to use it? Can you get consumers to buy it? Can you build a sustainable business? And those are other chapters in the business's evolution. The second piece, though, that I spoke about when you first asked the question is this idea of how you, the individual, is going to evolve as a CEO. And I think it's a hard thing to read about. It's a hard thing to listen to someone describe. It's kind of something you have to learn by doing. And so in some ways it encourages me to push younger people or people really of any experience level to go out and try to start a company, because you're not going to know necessarily what that seat feels like until you're actually doing it, until you're in the role. And I think it's a pretty challenging role. It's a role that evolves a lot at different stages. So being the CEO of a 10-person company is different than 50, is different than 100, is different than 1,000. And at each of those sort of inflections, you yourself has to evolve. At a stage of 10 or even 50 people, you as the entrepreneur, the CEO, can be driving a lot of individual contribution. Maybe you're the best computer scientist on the team. You could write a lot of the code. Maybe you're the best salesperson. You could close a lot of the deals. Maybe you're the product visionary. You could write the product specs. Okay, well, at some point, probably around 100 people, you really are only as good as the 6 or 8 people that you are managing. And that evolution of going from being an individual contributor and CEO to being really more of a manager and CEO is it's an important transition. And it's one that if you're not actually hyper aware is happening, you will break and your company will break. And so that was just sort of another thing I had to learn on the job.
I certainly agree with you. Did you find that as your company was growing, was it required of you to relinquish control? Like you can't do everything yourself, obviously, maybe up to about 20 or 30 people, you can do quite a bit yourself. You have a good personal relationship with all the employees. There's a family-oriented organization. You know, there's a good employee management bond. Did you find that as it was growing, that you needed to relinquish control or to give up things or to make some significant changes for not just you to succeed as a founder, but for the organization to succeed? What were those things?
I think this question also pertains a little bit to the type of business that you're building. So control and speed are kind of on either ends of the spectrum. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's say control is the degree to which you're the person making every decision in an organization. And let's say pace is the rate at which your organization moves or is able to execute. Well, if you're making all the decisions, you in theory have a lot of control over the organization, right? And you know, perhaps there are certain safeguards or certain types of businesses where it's more important to have that in place. You know, if you're starting a bank, for example, you might want to have more control and processes in place. But to be clear, that control and those processes are going to slow your organization down. On the other end of the spectrum, let's pretend that you've got an organization of 500 people, but all 500 people are making decisions every single day. Okay, that's an organization that's moving, right? And it's moving fast. So, but, you know, from a hierarchical standpoint, there's probably less control. Now, if you're maybe a super nimble software company and you're, you know, working in a consumer industry versus, say, a heavily regulated industry, that's probably the spectrum you want to be on. And for Whoop, early on, we realized that we wanted to build the company around research. And what I mean by that is we wanted the scientific community to be validating a lot of the data that we were putting out into the world. But interestingly, if you look at the research community often moved at this glacial pace, just super slow. Like studies take forever. There's all these boards. Like it was really, it still is, it's really slow. And so we realized that if we could base everything we did on research, but also move at a fast pace, that could be a differentiator for the company. And so as a consequence, I've tried to build Whoop over the last 12 years to move at an uncomfortable pace. We have it as a cultural value to have this real bias for action and to move at a fast pace. And what that means is then you, the CEO, or even you, the VP of fill in the blank, are going to pass control down into the organization. And so that's a very important transition to be mindful of. And as you grow, it becomes increasingly important for you to figure out how you're creating a culture within the company where people know how to make decisions. Because again, if you want to move fast, you need everyone making decisions. And so this goes into how you onboard employees. This goes into your cultural values. This goes into things you repeat to the company every week. You know, like I do an employee onboarding every 2 weeks where maybe I'm meeting 10 or 15 or 20 new people who have joined the company. One of the things I say to them is, we hired you to make decisions. We didn't hire you to form committees. And I think it's an important thing to say if again, you're on that spectrum of pace. And within everything I just said, you, as the CEO, can still find, I think, a few lanes where maybe you want to have much more depth. So for me, I've tried to build an organization that's moving fast while still being able to have a lot of product depth, for example, where I can spend a lot of time with designers and product managers, or where I can still have a fair amount of marketing depth, where I can, work with some of our top ambassadors, or work with the marketing team on a new creative launch. So you can pick your spots too. Like you don't feel like you have to relinquish everything.
Right.
But hopefully that gives you a sense of how to think about it, or at least how I've thought about it.
I think that's wonderful. I think as a founder, do you have a great say in which areas you want to focus on? Like which you're still going deep with marketing people, still going deep with the product people. Are you still engaged with your customers? Because I think your customers probably have changed over the years as you grow the company. What's your level of engagement with the people that are actually making money for you, the customer segments?
Well, by virtue of founding the company and being a spokesperson for the company, I get to meet people who wear Whoop every day. Whether I'm choosing to or not, I get to meet people every day who wear the product, and so that I love that, and you're constantly listening for ways that the product can get better and member feedback, and at the same time, then you're also balancing that with well, what do you think is the next future iteration of what the world needs, and that is a delicate balance. When I founded the company, I went out and met with lots of coaches and athletes. And again, Whoop today is a very broad consumer product, to be clear, but initially our audience was athletics. And so I went out and I met with coaches and athletes to ask them, hey, if I could build any type of technology for you, what would you want? And the recurring feedback was around exercise. How could we measure more about training? How could we have more data on GPS or movement or video analysis or sweat? Everyone was hyper-focused on the activity side of it. And when I asked them, well, what are some of the problems that you face? They often came back to availability, athletes getting injured, and a certain unpredictability to how a team was going to show up on a given game day. And so I thought there was actually a mismatch between what they were asking for and the problems that they were describing. And I do think there's an insight there for the entrepreneurs in the room, which is try to get very obsessed with the problem that you're solving and be a little skeptical of the solutions that a customer is trying to tell you to build. At least for Whoop, everyone was talking about exercise at a time when the world needed recovery, right? And so that was one of the insights that we had that was a little bit contrarian or different that helped the company be successful. And so I still carry some of that in the back of my mind today.
Recovery and sleep, is that an important part of the overall solution that you provide? It's not just intense exercise, that your body does need that time to recover and recuperate, and that's an integral part of your solution.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, recovery was really the metric that Whoop first introduced to the market. I would argue it's the metric that Whoop invented to the market. No one was talking about recovery when we came out with a recovery score in 2015. And even today, it's probably the single most used metric in the Whoop app, or it's the thing that people wake up every day and are sort of the most excited to engage with. And look, sleep plays a big role in recovery as well. Obviously, all of us try to sleep, so it's got big and wide market appeal. And I think that we're just sort of scratching the surface, even from a global standpoint, of understanding the importance of sleep. The research shows that good sleep is pretty much the cure-all for virtually everything in your life, and about a third to a quarter of your life is sleep. And yet, for most people, that's like a black box, and they have no idea what's happening for a quarter of their lives. And it turns out that there are simple things that you can change and tweak about your lifestyle or your behavior to dramatically improve your sleep. And you can really only manage what you measure. So by measuring your sleep, you can then identify, well, what are those few things that you can tweak to all of a sudden have higher quality sleep and maybe take a little bit more advantage of that third or quarter of our lives.
Do new technologies have a role to play in elevating your product? I know, for example, I believe it's tomorrow or the day after that you're attending the Doha Economic Forum, and the topic I believe is artificial intelligence. Is that something that you're planning on rolling out in your product? And does the introduction of AI technologies, does that help elevate the features and the value delivering to the customer?
Absolutely. I mean, look, I think artificial intelligence is going to change everything. And Whoop has always used artificial intelligence in a lot of our algorithms. I think the piece that's most new for Whoop, but also the world, is generative AI and a lot of the large language models that allow you now to, interact very seamlessly with an AI. And Whoop has been on the forefront of this. I mean, we were the first wearable company to partner with OpenAI. We've been partners with OpenAI since September of last year. And we now have a coach in the Whoop app that you can actually interact with, and you can ask questions about your data. So maybe you want to know what workout you should do today, or when you should go to bed, or why are you surprisingly run down, or are you getting sick? These are the types of questions that you can now ask Whoop, and it'll answer based on your data, but based on also a lot of population data that Whoop has access to in a de-identified and aggregated way. I think as AI accelerates, the AI layer will almost become a commodity, right? And what will be differentiated is the underlying data set that's unique. And so with Whoop, we feel like we have a pretty unique data set in that we get to collect 24/7 physiological data on your health and on your fitness and on your performance. So we should be able to have a huge opportunity in this new era.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can I ask a question about investors? You're one of the very fortunate that have secured significant investment. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, and you've recently closed a round with SoftBank, I believe it was, for $200 million. Your valuation is almost $4 billion. When you're talking about this kind of money, this amount of money, and these significant investors, did that have any? Did that force you to make any big changes in terms of what direction your company is facing? I know investors, for example, they're looking for growth, and they want return on their investment. Was that something that was always ingrained in your strategy in the early days of the company? Did investors pull you in a different direction? How was that an interaction?
Well, look, first of all, it's worth saying that fundraising is its own skill that you develop over time. And, when I meet with founders, I like to tell them that the first $400,000 I raised was a lot harder than the last $300 million, right? Like, just to say it, like it's a process to figure out how to raise capital. In the early days, you're going to face enormous rejection, and that's something you're going to have to learn to build a thick skin towards. I certainly had to. Like, I cannot tell you how many investors passed on Whoop, especially in the first 2 or 3 years of the company. And at various stages along the way, we had some really challenging moments where, again, a lot of investors passed on investing in Whoop. So rejection is kind of the first thing to get used to if you're going to be an entrepreneur. The other thing I would just say about investors is, like, it's a little bit of a numbers game. You'll meet with 10 investors or 20 investors, and maybe 2 or 3 will actually be excited about what you're doing. And look, that's okay. Like, don't get caught up on the non-believers. Just focus on the folks who do believe. And it's a little bit of a numbers game. I mean, especially for venture capitalists, just so you understand the math for them. Like, an early stage venture capitalist firm in a given year will meet about 1,000 companies, and they'll invest in 10 companies in that year. I mean, these are kind of rough numbers. It'll depend on the firm, but this is directionally accurate. And of those 10 companies, somewhere between 5 and 7 are going to fail. So all that's to say is, like, don't take what the venture capitalist says about your company too seriously. Like, if you hear the same thing a lot, okay, that might be a signal to think a little bit more. But really don't get too bogged down by investors passing on you. And that was something that at least I needed to learn to overcome. And again, it takes practice. The last piece of advice I would give about raising capital or investors is you want to find alignment in your vision. We certainly had investors that said, look, we like the technology a lot, but we think you should go this way, not this way. Mm-hmm. And that was counter to the mission that I had laid out. And fortunately, I never took capital from those folks, even though there were times where we very desperately needed capital. And so I just offer that as well, because I think raising capital from an investor it's like a marriage, but there's no divorce. I mean, they're on your cap table forever. And so you really need to build key alignment with your investors, and the best way to do that is to just be really honest up front about what you're looking for and what they're looking for.
You've had the same investors. Have any investors exited from Whoop yet, or same ones from?
Same ones.
Same ones. So are you thinking about IPO, or what's your exit strategy?
We've built Whoop to be a standalone company, and so the inevitable, path that takes you on is to go public one day.
Okay. One last question, if I may. You've been in the region for a few days. Any special events or announcements you want to maybe tell us in public here? Has anything happened that you want to announce? Any major event?
Well, recently we just yesterday, we announced that Cristiano Ronaldo is now an investor in Whoop and a global ambassador. So that's obviously a very exciting, high-profile football player. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And, I think we've always tried at Whoop to build authentic stories. And we think of marketing as really just telling authentic stories. And Ronaldo was someone who had been wearing Whoop actually for the last 2 years. Okay. And he had 95% data compliance. I mean, he wore the thing every single day. And his team actually reached out to us about a potential partnership. And so we got to know each other a little bit and started talking about the future. And this also came at a time when we were growing internationally. We've just now launched in about 15 new markets. We've launched in a bunch of countries in the GCC, which we're very excited about. And so it really felt like the right time to have more of a global ambassador, or someone with more global recognition. And here's an athlete who's arguably the pinnacle of human performance throughout his career. He's been at the very top of his game for 20 years, and he uses the product obsessively to focus on recovery and behaviors and all sorts of things that Whoop talks about. So from that standpoint, it felt like a terrific match.
Quite an endorsement.
Thank
for Ronaldo. Thank you very much. I think we'll take an opportunity now to ask the audience if you have any questions for Will. Gentleman with the New York Yankees hat.
I'm a startup as well, and I'm wondering, how do you attract the talent to your company, especially at a startup and growth stage?
Well, in the earliest days, you really want to find missionaries versus mercenaries, so to speak. You want people who are deeply aligned with your vision and the mission for your company. And depending on how big your company is, like I think if your company's less than 20 people, for example, I think they're also people you want to really get along with. I mean, those early days are very very intimate. You spend a lot of time with the individuals that you start a company with at the startup stage, and I think having great camaraderie and being comfortable around one another is super important. So I think ideally you're looking for people who have a similar vision for the world that you do, or people that you can convince of your vision for the world, and people you get along with really well. And then the third piece is hopefully they have some complementary skills to your existing team. So if you're maybe you're more of the product sales guy, you want to find someone maybe more technical. Maybe you are you have a great vision for how you're going to market the product, but you're lacking the data side of it. Like, you want to find people that have less overlapping skills and more complementary skills. And I think that's also important at the early stage.
Yes, the gentleman in the front, please. Maybe if you could just stand so they could see your mic.
So I was wondering, what are the end game for using AI? What is the future, like features that you would like to implement, especially with the new ChatGPT 4.0 that released yesterday? So yeah, what are your hopes that you would achieve with the new innovations that are coming up with AI? Also, when is Whoop 5.0 coming out? We are waiting.
I see a whoop on your wrist, so I appreciate that. So on the AI side, I think like Whoop is going to build this underlying data set, right? And it's going to be a very powerful data set. It'll be the most accurate data set. We'll incorporate data from other places that our members choose to share with us. So maybe you'll choose to share data from other products you use or other apps that you use, or even data from seeing your doctor. And the layer that Whoop will build on top of this data will be the AI that allows you to interact with everything and to summarize it in a very unstructured way. And what that would allow for is for Whoop to become your 24/7 coach, your 24/7 trainer, your 24/7 nutritionist, your 24/7 doctor one day. I mean, I do think the power of health monitoring is that it'll be able to predict illnesses and heart attacks and strokes and diseases and all sorts of amazing things. And I do feel like in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see this massive golden age for health awareness. No comment.
Yes, please.
As an athlete, I look forward to using Whoop, but me and my siblings have been using it on day one. So we're looking forward and asking questions about, are you looking forward to collaborate with sportswear companies such as Nike and Adidas? And also, I would like a free Whoop, if that's possible.
So in terms of working with apparel companies or big sports brands, I think, when you have a product that people like, or product market fit is a good way to describe it in the world of startups. When you have that, then the next step is, how do you get bigger distribution? How do you get the product available to more and more people? And one way to do that, to your question, is partnerships. And some partnerships can really turbocharge your business, and some partnerships just turn out to be kind of a grind and hard and might maybe not necessarily worth all the time and energy that's going into them. I grew up a huge fan of Nike. I in some ways have built Whoop, modeling certain aspects around their brand, and just the idea that, putting a swoosh on something versus, the same thing not having a swoosh, it all of a sudden changes how you feel about that thing. Like a white cotton t-shirt with a swoosh versus just a white cotton t-shirt, all of a sudden it changes the t-shirt. That was something to me that at a young age I found quite fascinating. And so, I'd love to work with companies like that, or Nike specifically. I think that the challenge with working with these behemoth companies, these very large companies, is they often are operating on a very different time horizon and at a very different pace. Remember how we talked about pace and control? The reason that startups can even exist is that big companies get in their own way. And they have a lot of processes and they have controls, and so they can't innovate quickly. And so for us to do something successfully with those companies, it also will take some malleability on their side as well.
And I'll move to this side of the room. The young lady, please. Yeah, you.
Hello, thank you for your talk. I wrote it down just to make sure I get everything right. So the way you framed talking about the technology was very much framed in a way that was positive and serves individuals, fitness and health-wise, through providing a tool to better themselves, correct? Okay, so however, people who do work on wearable devices know how there are a ton of issues related to privacy, data capitalism, and data surveillance. So building upon the answers you've given related to AI and data analysis, I want to know, in what ways does Whoop ensure that data collected by the company does not go beyond what the users have consented for in ways that violates their privacy and personal autonomy? And also, how does Whoop ensure that individuals' health comes before profit and certain, I don't want to say capitalist, but maybe profit-driven objectives?
It's a great question. In the early days of the company, we actually were exclusively working with professional athletes, and the consequence, that was great in a lot of ways, but one of the consequences of it was that we had to worry about data privacy at a stage so much earlier than other companies. Like we had 100 people on Whoop, and all of a sudden we're dealing with, lawyers for super high-profile athletes who want to make sure the data is secure because it was so valuable. So we actually built this into our DNA very early on, this idea of data privacy and security. And we also have now published privacy principles. And one of those principles is that the consumer owns the data. You, the individual, are not the product. We're not putting something on your body that we can then sell to someone else to market to you. The subscription, that's the product. That's what we make money from. And yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, we published these privacy principles, and look, I do think that's how it should be. A lot of big tech companies, I think, have abused the rights of our data, have abused the rights of privacy, and they've made each one of us the product, right? Where we're being marketed to based on information that company is selling, or big tech is selling to others. And so we never felt like that was right. And in fact, we thought having a really strong data privacy policy could be a differentiator for Whoop. And so I think it has been. We do analysis on data in a de-identified, aggregated way, and that allows us to do pretty powerful research. It also allows the experience that you have on Whoop to be better based on the fact that we have X number of people that look similarly to you, and we've learned certain behaviors and patterns that worked for them that can now work for you. So that's probably one benefit of big data. The last thing that we do with members is we often ask whether they want to participate in studies, and this would allow them to participate in a pregnancy study, or we just did one on stress and blood pressure. We do them on all sorts of different, types of drugs and supplements and medications. And so members can opt in to participate in that study. And as part of the opt-in process, they know exactly who that data is being shared with. Normally, it would be a research provider or a research institution. So that's how we think about data.
The gentleman in the back, please.
Hi, Will. Thank you for sharing your experience. It was really insightful. My question is, what is the average life cycle of your customers, and what are you doing to extend it?
Yeah, so I'll give you a longer answer for a second. So in 2017, Whoop was selling the product as a one-time fee. So you would sign up for Whoop and you'd pay $500, and we would just sell you the hardware. And with that, you could use it for as long as you'd like. Well, in 2017, we observed a couple things. The first was that people who bought Whoop actually were wearing it for a very long time. They weren't taking it off. We didn't have these the same drop-off rates that had plagued other wearables before. Companies like Fitbit, this is all public information, but companies like Fitbit had these drop-off rates where after 3 weeks or 3 months, people who bought the product were no longer wearing it. So we didn't have that problem. But we had a different problem in 2017, which was that not that many people were buying Whoop at all. And so we needed to think about what our business model looked like. And so that what we came up with was shifting the whole business from being hardware-centric to being a membership, where you sign up and the hardware is included, and then you just pay a monthly rate over time. Or you can sign up for a prepaid membership and pay for a year at a discounted rate. And what that did is it made Whoop a subscription, but it also put the pressure on us to be constantly innovating and adding new features. And the same way Netflix comes out with new shows, Whoop needs to come out with new features or new analytics or new insights. And so that was a really powerful business model shift that we made. And as a consequence, it's helped the business grow pretty exceptionally in the last, I guess now 7 years, because people were able to sign up at a much lower rate and be able to try the product. And in fact, we realized that the product was so sticky that we then offered the product for free, where you could try it for free for 30 days and decide whether you wanted to become a member. And again, all these decisions go back to really putting the product first and then putting the consumer in a position to decide, hey, is this something we want to pay for? And the last thing I would say is, if you think about the mission of unlocking human performance, which is the Whoop mission, or the mission of improving health, it's really not a one-time thing, right? Your life and your health needs evolve considerably over time. And in some stages, you're maybe trying to be very healthy. In other stages, you're more focused on your career or business or family. And in other stages, maybe you're dealing with a certain health issue. And we wanted to build a product that evolved throughout those ebbs and flows. And again, it puts more pressure on us as a business that a consumer can cancel at any time. And it really forces us back to that conversation of pace. It forces us to be innovating and releasing features at a constant rate. So that's a little bit of background on our business model.
Great. The gentleman in the middle. Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure listening to your story, to be honest.
Thank you.
But my question is related to the balance between ROI and innovation as such. Because let's just say you develop something that can measure, I don't know, let's just say lactate threshold, for example, or an element of anything related to recovery and repair. So whether it would be, let's just say, white blood cell count or anything in terms of inflammation markers as such, that will be quite costly in terms of the production side. Or maybe the return on investment might not be so much. Where do you draw the balance between yourself, the vision, and the investors that you have overall?
I think some of your question is pointed at how do you balance invention with iteration, right? If invention is creating something from 0 to 1, and iteration is kind of n+1, or tweaking and improving an existing thing versus creating something that's never existed before. And there's probably different ways to think about this from a budgeting standpoint, but I would say that 60 to 70% of the work that Whoop is doing is on iteration, and 30 to 40% is on invention. And we like inventing. We like trying to create something that hasn't existed before. There's a catch, though, in that, which is you have to be careful to recruit people who get excited to invent things. if you say to someone, you're going to work on a project that has never been done before, and we don't know whether it's possible, that person's either going to perk up or they're going to be spooked, right? And that's fine, like that's a human reaction. But you want the people who get perked up, right? And so it goes a little bit back to recruiting, it goes back to culture. You want to find the people who are able to live in that that place that's a little uncomfortable, and they get excited by it. And by the way, the people who are working on that type of invention might actually be a little bit different than the people who are working on the iteration. And depending on the stage of your business, you may be allocating, 100% of your resources to the invention thing. I mean, in the early stages of the company, all we were doing was trying to invent things that didn't exist. Now we've got, a big existing member base, and we've got, customers paying every month. So we have a large percentage of people working on iteration. So those are some of the different ways to think about invention and iteration.
The young lady in the back, please.
Hello, thank you so much for the session. I have a question regarding building trust on the team. So you mentioned that on the onboarding, you are telling the new joiner that we're hiring you to make decision. How can you trust the new joiners to take decision in the company? And after how long you can rely on a new joiner on that? And how can you guarantee that he digests the details that make the company like competitive in the market?
I think the first thing is that you want to, well, I'll just say how Whoop operates. I want to create a framework for people in their minds that they need to be working quickly to figure out how they can be making decisions. And different organizations just have different cultural values as it relates to that. But if you say to someone on their first day, hey, we want you to start making decisions, all of a sudden they kind of perk up towards, okay, well, what do I need to learn or understand? What do I need to get alignment with my manager around so that I can start making decisions? And it's unlikely that that person's just going to come out kind of guns blazing, making a lot of bad decisions. It's more likely that they're now just going to have an orientation towards how can I start making decisions. Having a really strong culture is also another mechanism for decision making. I mean, at the end of the day, culture is how people make decisions when you're not around. And so the more things that you do to instill a strong culture in your organization, whatever that culture may be, that's going to create the guiding principles around decision making.
Thank you. I'll just the gentleman in the front.
Thank you.
I'm trying to go across the room as much as I can. Yes, please.
Thanks for your sharing your experience. I'm a recent adopter of Whoop, and one of the things that I find interesting is the multi-pronged approach that you have. So you focus on hardware, software, AI, fashion, research on insights. How do you balance between all of those different aspects, especially given that you've decentralized a lot of the decision making?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's also somewhat specific to the wearables industry. I didn't realize this when I founded Whoop, but the wearable technology just requires that you have to be great at at least 5 things to have a chance. You have to be great at hardware, software, analytics, design, probably some notion of community or brand, because it's something that you're wearing on your body, so it starts to say a lot about who you are. And so we just needed to be great at all those things to have a chance. A lot of companies can be successful by being great at 2 or 3 things, and and that's fine too. And I think it's worth asking yourself when you build a company, what are the 1, 2, 3, maybe it's 5. What are the 5 things that we need to be great at to be successful? And you may find it's actually 2 or 3 things. And then what role do you have to play as the CEO to drive the organization to be great at those 2, 3 things, right? Now, if we kind of go back to the 5 things that you mentioned or I mentioned, they all tie to the product vision and the marketing story, right? Now, again, it's still a broad set of things, but if I can be pretty clear about what the vision is for the product, and if I can be able to touch and feel the marketing story, all of a sudden now I've got a way to interact with those 5 areas. And so I'll go deep on those different categories that I just mentioned. And look, I'm more of a hands-on CEO. I think that you can find different ways to manage or balance an organization. And again, I do think it's a helpful exercise to say, hey, what are the few areas that we need to be great at?
Yes, the gentleman on the end, please. I see you. Someone's waving at. I see you. Don't worry.
Hi, hello. I'm a Scottish golf professional, and I'd just like to recommend your product. I've been involved in golf all my life. I work for Qatar Foundation for Education City Golf Club, and I'm fortunate that I've been involved in the game of golf, which is it's a very healthy sport, health and well-being. And 8 months ago, I was diagnosed with sleep apnea and high blood pressure. But I got a wonderful gift, the Whoop at Christmas time, and I've had it on every single day. And I'd just like to say that I no longer need any medication. It's been a great
All
help.
right.
That made a difference.
Love that.
So thank you,
Fantastic.
Whoop.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being on Woo.
Well, I'm glad we
Thank
gave
you.
you a chance to ask your question. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
In the back, please. Center back. Oh, 2 people. Okay, we'll take one. Ladies first, then, if it's okay.
Hi, my name's Nada. I'm a national team golf player in Qatar, and I'm on the fence of buying the Whoop for 2 reasons. Because as a golfer, I play tournaments. For example, in the last month, I've played tournaments in the mountains, and I've played tournaments at sea level. Is Whoop, are you trying to look into expanding Whoop and considering environmental factors that affect our health, our sleep, and our mental well-being, like cognitive performance or mood fluctuations?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would add that your body also knows that it's in a different environment. Like your body's going to be reacting to these different environments that you're playing in. It's worth saying that when you're at altitude, that's something that is going to increase your respiratory rate. It might increase your resting heart rate. It's definitely going to disrupt your sleep quality. When you're in an environment that's much more humid or much hotter, it's going to decrease your heart rate variability. It's going to increase your stress levels. May also negatively impact your sleep. And these are all things that when you start measuring, you can start managing. And Whoop actually exploded in the golf world. I mean, it really took off in the golf world. And I think in large part because professional golfers realized how much their environment and their travel were affecting their body. And so by wearing Whoop, all of a sudden they had a way to understand, what can I do to recover better and sleep better? And they realized also that how they were recovering was playing a big role in how they were playing and their score. And so, Whoop is the official wearable of the PGA Tour, the LPGA Tour. Rory McIlroy is an investor in the company. Nelly Korda is an investor in the company. Most people consider them the best men and women's golfers in the world. So, pretty good company. So the question was around the mental aspect, and she wisely pointed out that chess players burn a lot of calories during their to the stress accumulation. So it's worth saying that like Whoop actually has a stress monitor in the app that is measuring your stress throughout the day, and in fact has a big focus on how mental stress affects your body. I would also just reiterate that sleep is one of the most important things for mental well-being. Whoop very specifically measures the different stages of your sleep, but in particular it measures the amount of REM sleep that you get every night. And REM sleep is when your mind is repairing. And plenty of research shows that people who are struggling with their mental health or their mental well-being are not getting enough REM sleep. And so getting more REM sleep and even finding ways to increase your REM sleep is a great offset for stress and for mental health.
Please. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a startup in the fitness and wellness space. So it was really music to our ears to hear that you believe it's the golden era for the health conscious and all that. So would you mind expanding a little bit on that? What are you seeing at the moment currently, and what do you foresee? And if the time allows, just interesting for a startup, if you have one or two examples about a function or department that you've decided to either bring it in-house or outsource, and at what point?
On the health journey side of things, when I was founding Whoop, the iPhone was kind of like a few years into existence. And that was exciting because you could tell that all of a sudden there was going to be a smartphone in everyone's pocket, and you could now have this sort of remote control for the world, right? And other pieces of technology could connect to it, and so that for me was like it was an exciting moment to be starting a company, knowing that I could have an app on a smartphone and have a piece of hardware that sent data to it. I think if you're starting a company today, you also know that there's going to be a layer of artificial intelligence that's going to be able to act as an operating system to interact with. And one of the challenges that we as consumers have faced is we have all these different data points on our body or our health, or we don't have data points at all, and they're all in different places. And so one of the things that we're focused on at Whoop is how do we ingest more of this data in one place to be a home for your health? And then how do we make it easy for that artificial intelligence layer to help you understand what's really happening to your body, or help you predict something serious before it happens, right? And I really believe in the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to see an unbelievable growth to preventative medicine as a consequence of that. I think your second question was around different functional departments and what you outsource versus you keep in-house. I think that for the most part, you want to try to build things in-house that are core to your company's success. And so that goes back to what does your company need to be really great at? And then you can outsource some components, but I think with time, you want to try to bring more and more in-house.
I think we'll have time for about 2 questions. The gentleman that, yes, please, with the mic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Saeed Ismail. We at the Qatar Biobank and the Qatar Genome Project, we claim, now under one umbrella called the Qatar Precision Health Institute, we claim that we have the largest health-related data set in the Middle East. Is Whoop interested in research partnerships with such large-scale, population-level research projects? Have you been into this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at any given time, we're probably working with 15 to 20 different research institutions, and you know, I'm very excited by Qatar as a market and as a place to grow our business. I've been coming here quite a bit in the last 12 months, and the product's been growing a lot here as well. And I actually got a tour of the biobank, so we'd love to do something together. How about right here in the front row? I see
Yes,
a whoop.
please. Let's do. Yeah, why not?
When you got a
Please,
whoop on, it
please.
makes it easier.
Hi, thank you so much for this speech so far. It's been absolutely amazing. We've heard that this was first for athletes and then the Gen Pop, not then, but the Gen Pop as well. And I'm just wondering, are there any thoughts for kids? Like the youngest, you can have them for like years and years and years then. Any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think today the product is used by 13-year-olds and older, and some of that also is to comply with regulations from iOS and Android on how young someone can be that collects health data. I think that there's no question, first of all, that 13, 15, 18-year-olds today are much more tech savvy than any generation before it. And I don't think that's going to change. I think that young people are just going to increasingly be very comfortable with technology and with data. And so in a sense that makes it a super exciting and important market to be working with. And I think the question of then going younger than 13 years old is going to be a little bit more of a regulatory question. The technology certainly will exist to be able to do it, and it's more a question of, well, what are the parental rights associated with that, and what do you do with the data and things of this nature? But it's certainly an interesting market.
We'll take one final question. The young lady, please.
We got another whoop here in the front row. We have to get to him
Okay,
too.
you want to take his after?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Lamis. Thank you for your time and sharing your experience and knowledge with us. I would like to know, the question is, I would like to know what is the challenging decision you had to take recently, and what is the framework that helped you to come to the decision?
Well, I'll give you a general decision-making framework, which is the decision that you're making, is it going to have a huge impact on the company, or is it going to have a small impact? And is the decision that you're making a one-way door, in the sense that once you do it, you can't go back? Or is it a two-way door? And which means you can make the decision, but later you can change the decision. And so decisions that have a huge impact on your business, that are one-way doors, are decisions that you want to pay a lot of attention to. So, who your lead investor is for a round of financing. That's a one-way door, and it's a huge decision. So you, the CEO, wants to play a big role in that decision. The font size and logo treatment of something on your homepage. Maybe it feels like it's a big decision, but it's actually maybe not that big of a decision, and it's also a two-way door. You can change that, any day. And so as you think about the decisions that you're making versus the decisions that you're delegating, try to focus on decisions that are one-way doors and have a huge impact.
And you said there was someone with a whoop.
Yeah, right here.
All right. Please.
Preferential treatment if you're wearing a whoop visibly.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
We're happy to having you in Education City, and welcome to Qatar.
Thank you.
As a coach and a triathlete, as you know, we do swim, bike, run. So we had a small challenge with the battery life, as we do like 3 sessions sometime in a day of training sessions. And hope we get something for our kids, because as we see like many kids here in Qatar, like wear the hoop with the very tight strap. So that's happy to be something for their kids. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. We'll work on both of those things.
Thank you. Thank you all for your questions. Thank you very much for the insight. I know there's a lot more questions.
Okay, we got one more whoop here.
One more?
He's made
Okay.
himself very
You're
visible.
the boss, so yeah.
Look,
He's been waiting, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks so much for allowing me to ask the question. So I'm also a triathlete and a coach, and I've been using Whoop for about 4 or 5 months. but I've also been using Garmin for about 4 years. Just recently, I started to notice that Garmin is changing the user interface and starting to become a little bit more like Whoop in terms of, because I feel like they thought some kind of danger coming from the side of Whoop. So how are you planning to kind of deal with that competition? Because obviously Garmin has been in the market for a very long time. So is there, first of all, is there danger coming, and how are you planning to deal with it? Thank you.
It's a good question. I mean, look, I think that, imitation's a form of flattery. It's a positive way to look at it. Another way to look at it is that competitors are going to try to kill you in the market. And so I think it's often the case that the companies that are copying are just one step behind. And so, I'd encourage you to see some of the things that we release over the course of the next 12 months. And I think you'll continue to see us stay out in front. At least that's how we think about it. We're certainly aware of what the competition is doing, but we're not changing decisions based on what the competition's doing. We're trying to stay true to our own compass. And I think that's a hard thing to do. Often when competitors do something in the market, it can kind of test that compass, or it can kind of pull you a little bit off course. But the things that you do that other companies don't do, or the things that you don't do that other companies do, all of that makes your company unique. And it's going to take a unique company to be successful at the end of the day.
One more?
Okay,
Will?
deal.
Will, what do you say? One more?
Of course.
Okay.
No, with a whoop. I'm winner of one of the top 10 startup tech with a recovery app, actually. And I'm a collaborator and also a brand ambassador of Whoop in the Middle East.
Great,
So
thank you.
it's a huge pleasure. 2 questions. As if Apple decides to integrate the technology and functionality into the Apple Watch, how do you see innovating from here? And second, as an athlete and a coach, I see a lot of the impact that we have with nutrition into our recovery. Have you had any insight or any plans to try to integrate that to the technology? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. On the nutrition side, that's something that we're actively looking at incorporating and bringing into the app. So look for some updates on that front. And then, to your Apple question, I think that we've chosen to be very focused on health data, and so similar to the gentleman's question earlier, like Whoop is great at all the things that we do for a lot of the things that we don't do. Like we don't have a high resolution screen, we don't have 100 apps. We're not going to do emails, we're not going to do phone calls, we're not going to do push notifications. But we are going to be really, really great at health data and accuracy. And so by being really focused on those things, it allows us to be better at Apple in those things. And by not doing those other things, it allows a consumer to decide what they're really looking for. Interestingly, a good number of Whoop members will actually wear both an Apple Watch and a Whoop. And then, they'll take their Apple Watch off for various occasions or to charge it or whatever, and the Whoop will stay on. So we're comfortable with that relationship. We've tried to find a way actually to be complementary with watches versus compete with watches. And it's one of the reasons that Whoop doesn't have a screen.
Thank you again very much for all your questions. Thank you, Will.
Thank you.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you very much.
So much knowledge, so many insights. We're in the age of YouTube, of course, so it's very convenient that we can all watch this video again on Qatar Foundation's channel. And I encourage you also to go on QF's website to be reminded of any future events. Please join me in thanking Will once again for your insight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.